We are in the second week of counting the Omer, and as Mark mentioned, we're focusing on Gvura, on our strength and our power. As we think about this in general, and especially on Yom HaShoah, we want to remind ourselves that this is not about physical prowess or about our power to dominate, but rather Gvura is a grounded fortitude built on wise judgment and on knowing our own limits. As Mark said, we often refer to this day as Yom HaShoah, Israel's Holocaust Remembrance Day, and all of ours, but the full name is especially critical. As Mark just said, I'm going to say it again and slow it down a little bit. In Hebrew, it's Yom HaZikaron LaShoah LaGvura. And it's critical that we have remembrance in the full title of this observance today, but also we have the name of the Jewish mystical dimension that is infusing our week, this Gvura, this strength. So Holocaust and Heroism Remembrance Day, heroism, Gvura, strength. And as Mark also mentioned, the chosen date for this observance is the actual date of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, the symbol of utmost strength and the will to survive that our ancestors gathered to be able to fight back against evil and to resist. It was one of the largest resistance efforts during the Holocaust. But commemorating this event also honors the countless smaller struggles and schemes to save even one life. And many did ensure that people survived. People shared scarce food so others would not starve. They snuck supplies to those in captivity. They found jobs for prisoners in the camps, and they risked their own lives to hide people and belongings. So in this second week of counting the Omer, we stand at the intersection of Gvura, the strength, this fortitude in the Jewish mystical tradition, and the power of remembering the heroism of our ancestors, the tenacious efforts across the spectrum from so many to protect themselves and others, even as we mourn devastating loss on this day of Yom HaShoah. I want to also mention that we have a midah, we have one of the Jewish mystical dimensions in our tradition that is specifically focused on today, on this 12th day of the Omer, and that is Tiferet, or this great harmonizing that can feel challenging to us on a day of remembering the heroism of our ancestors. I want to dedicate this sit today to the memory of a person for me who symbolizes strength, wisdom, and fortitude. A teacher, Rabbi Kalonymus Kalman Shapira, was known as the first Piatzner Rabbi. He was born in 1889 in a renowned Hasidic family. He was passionate about education, stressing positive methods that would create connection and joy. Imprisoned in the Warsaw Ghetto, he took an active role in supporting Jewish life. And his works from this period include a personal diary, a collection of sermons that grapple with personal and communal suffering. Rabbi Shapira was killed in a mass shooting in the Traniki work camp on November 3rd, 1943. And his manuscripts were later discovered buried in a milk canister in the ghetto. His sense of Gvura, his sense of commitment, his sense of determination, that his teaching and that his wisdom and his community's experience of struggle and resistance and goodness would survive and would be discovered by future generations is very, very inspiring to me. One of his writings that I gain special inspiration from is a book that he wrote known as Conscious Community, a guide to inner work. And I'm going to share a teaching from this work. And thank you to Jet, who will put a link to the teaching. It's not going to screen share it today, but it's available on Safaria, and you'll get that link so you can look it up for greater context. But why this piece and why on this day? For me, I am so inspired by Rabbi Shapira's description of what it means to be in community. And when I think about this teaching, and I think about this community that we are gathered in right now, this IJS virtual community dedicated to coming together on a daily basis, and really feeling like we are living out through this IJS meditation community the values and the vision of Rabbi Shapira. So I want to share with you a very brief teaching when he talks about what is the purpose of coming together in community. I don't want to say that his teaching is how I view this virtual community that's been coming together since the days of the pandemic. Thank you to IJS and to Mark and so many to keep it vital and together and inspirational for all of us. So Rabbi Shapira says, our purpose is to rise a level above the world and its tumult. Our purpose is founded on humbling and elevating, humbling the substance of body and spirit and elevating their holiness. I'm going to read it one more time. Our purpose is to rise a level above the world and its tumult. Our purpose is founded on humbling and elevating, humbling the substance of body and spirit and elevating their holiness. This is exactly what we're doing when we come together to sit. We're having the audacity to say that when we stop, when we put aside the other things in our world and come to sit in community, that our purpose is to try to rise a level above, to try to acknowledge the tumult, the frustration, the things we don't understand, the injustice, the evil around us, just as he was with his community in the Warsaw Ghetto, trying to say, no, we're going to have a purpose to rise above. And how is this done? It's done, actually, the rising is done through this humbling and elevating at the same time. This is a beautiful description of how we view the Jewish mystical dimensions of the Sefirot that ground us in our counting of the Omer. That each week we have one dimension we focus on, and each day we have another dimension that is infused through that weekly dimension. The rising and the humbling, the elevating and the emanating down into the world. This is what he's trying to tell us, that the purpose of being in community is all about. So while today is the 12th day of the Omer, and Givurah, or strength, is associated with the entire second week of the Omer, the mystical dimension of Tiferet is refracted on this day in particular. Tiferet, the one mystical dimension that is meant to harmonize all of the other dimensions, especially Chesed on one end and Gevurah, love and judgment. How do we find ourselves between those two ends of the spectrum? He's telling us it's through humbling and through elevating, both by knowing our strength and knowing the limit of our strength. And Rabbi Shapira reflects this dimension in the teaching. We humble the substance of our body and spirit by sitting, by quieting ourselves, and yet in doing so, we elevate their holiness. So I invite you to come into this humbling and elevating, finding your seat in whatever position is one of dignity for you today in this moment. And today we will sit. We will sit in this seeming contradiction of humbling and elevating in our own gevurah, in our own internal fortitude of strength. And we will remember through our breath and through being present with each other. And at the end of our sit, I'll bring us out of our time together, a time of quiet, through a wordless melody, a nigun. And please join in together as we come out of the sit, if that feels the right thing for you in this moment. Leider,
Thank you so much, Susan, as always. Thank you so much. Friends, as you know, we seal our practice every day by offering an opportunity for those who are in mourning or observing a yard site, or if it's their custom to join in the mourner's Kaddish. Today, I want to invite, given that it is Yom HaShoah, want to encourage and invite those of you who are comfortable doing so to join us in reciting the Kaddish. If you're comfortable doing so, if not, that's totally fine as well. But to do it in the spirit of reciting the mourner's Kaddish for those who have no one to recite Kaddish for them, especially today. So thanks to Jet for sharing the words on the screen. If you are observing your art site or honoring anyone in particular today, or perhaps you have relatives who perished in the Shoah, you'd like to mention by name in the chat, either now or after we recite Kaddish, you are, of course, encouraged to do that as well. So I invite you to join me by rising in body or in spirit to recite the words together. If the cacophony of everyone reciting it is too much for you, you can, of course, turn the volume off or down on your device. And thanks for joining us. Yikadal, Rabbi, Yamad
Amen.
Friends, thank you for joining us, especially today on this Yom HaShoah. Really want to thank our teacher today, Rabbi Susan Leider, for leading us so beautifully and skillfully. Beautiful teaching for today. And of course, as always, you are invited to stay on for conversation with our teacher about the teaching today and about the to share reflections on the practice. And if not, we hope you'll join us tomorrow or another day this week for our ongoing community of practice. Want to thank Jet Bachman for holding our space with skill and grace, as they always do. And if you would like to share a reflection or ask a question, please put it in the chat box. And if it's a question, if you could preface it by writing question in all caps, that would be great. Thank you so much, Susan. I'm thinking about, first of all, I really appreciated, as not only have you taught us beautifully so many times, but also just been a regular and supportive member of this conscious community of practice. And I really appreciated you making that connection between the teaching and work of the Piasetzner Rebbe, Rabbi Kalonymus Kalman Shapira of the Warsaw Ghetto, who taught so powerfully on on creating conscious Jewish spiritual community. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about that in a moment, and invite you to say a little bit more, because I know there was a lot of material there also about, in particular, how you were referencing Gevura and humility, the roles of those qualities in spiritual community. I do want to, as we were sitting, and also as we were reciting Kaddish, I was thinking of our colleague, Rabbi Ira Stone, who I know once upon a time, I don't know if he still does this, would actually engage in a fast of words on Yom HaShoah, would not speak on this day, which always struck me as that's really what there's this in Israel. Of course, there's a siren that sounds, and there's a moment where of total silence in the country. But the idea of silence and being together in community in silence as really the best way to kind of meet the moment of this occasion strikes me as really very powerful. So that segues into my question to you about Gevura as creating this container for spiritual community. I just wanted to invite you to say a little bit more about how you were understanding that. Oh, you're muted, Susan. Sorry.
Sorry, I was sighing. I was giving a crash there in response to the question. I'm struck by Ira's practice of fasting from language on this day, because, and I will get to your question, Mark, but because it almost seems that like whatever we say isn't enough or isn't right for the moment. So I am that sense of humility right now. I think in the simple meaning, very simple but hard to do, Gevura means the practice itself and the dedication and being mindful of the container that we create, even when our heart and our mind and our bodies aren't necessarily aligned with that. And I say that on a personal level, coming through a period of transition where I've just moved from one apartment to the other, and those kinds of things that make it internally difficult to keep the Gevura, to keep the structure, and the some would use the word discipline or dedication to keep the container of what our spiritual practices are. So that's one thing that comes to mind, just the ongoing challenge of how do I do that as an individual with chesed, with love and compassion, and understanding on the days when I can't. Also, not saying that every day is a day I'm going to have chesed on myself, and I can't, right? Because then you end up with a long string of of being disconnected, right? And all that brings. And I say that with also full cognizance of how difficult it is to talk about the individual conditions when there is this greater context of the history of our people, the pain, the suffering, the murder, the loss, and the devastation that all that brings, and wondering how I, as an individual, struggling with the gevura of my practice, how does that intersect, right, with the greater whole? I'll leave that question to be unanswered for now, but that's what I'm thinking about when I think about gevura today.
Yeah.
Practice.
Yeah, that's really, it's a beautiful answer. I'm putting, by the way, people are asking for, this official name, which is interesting that, colloquially and, in kind of general usage, it's just thought referred to as Yom HaShoah, but it's powerful that the actual name it's really Yom HaZikaron. It's a day of remembrance of calling to mind the Shoah and also the Gevura, both the unfathomable loss and also really the unfathomable heroism of those who resisted, both Jews and non-Jews, of course, who resisted evil. And Lori's asking I think a good question about how we're using humility and how maybe looking at the sources that you shared, what the upshot of it that I get, maybe you can correct me because I'm just looking at it very cursorily, but that because that's the Rabbi is trying to he's convening a community of people who said who are pained by distance from God, who really yearn, in this, he says, in the same way they'd be worried about their physical health, they're equally worried about their spiritual health and yearn to have this sense of wholeness, which I think is pretty powerful. To think about that, are you as worried about the health of your soul as you are about the health of your physical body? That's interesting. He says, if you are, then yeah, please join us. And I think about that as not, it's an interesting way of thinking about this particular community of people who are tending to their souls every day in an ongoing way in community. But humility, Lori was asking, can you offer, Susan, some guidance or a gauge for how to distinguish between humility as right-sizing rather than self-diminishing or self-deprecating, which is where I go. This is what Lori writes, which is where I go when I think about humbling myself. So maybe we can think a little bit about how we're using the English word humility there.
Yeah, but going back to the teaching, and I didn't read it in Hebrew, although people who would like to can look on Sefaria on the link to see that. But I having that in front of me now. Shiflut is what Shiflut Etzem Haguf is what he's using here. So, and I think unpacking that gives some guidance. So Shiflut literally means a lowering. And I actually think that on a day when we are in collective mourning, it's actually easier to access this perhaps than in other days. Why? Because mourners physically lower their bodies as a representation of the lowering or the muting that they feel in response to the loss. So when we go into a traditional Shiva home, traditionally mourners will be sitting on low stools, and that when we say the words Hamakom Yenachem Etchem B'Tov She'ar Avalei B'Tzion B'Yerushalayim, these traditional words of may God comfort you, it's traditional for the comforter to be literally taller than the person who is sitting in shiflut in this lowered position. So I think that for me, and this is not about beating ourselves up or wanting to be a mourner every day of the year, God forbid, but this studying this particular text on this particular day gives us an opening, right? That when we come in a lowered place, we might be more open. We might be more vulnerable, more beginner's mind. I mean, whatever
Mhm.
analogy works, right? But that we're coming at this in a way that is not from a place of all knowingness. And so what does it mean to bring that aspect in on days when we're not mourners, right? Without the sadness, without the mystery of the devastation piece,
Yeah.
but retaining that, what does it mean to be in that open and vulnerable and discombobulated?
Right. Maybe that's what brings this together in that sense, is that I'm really glad you use that phrase beginner's mind, meaning not knowing, right? And this is a historical phenomenon which it seems like, I don't want to say the only response, but like the appropriate response, speaking personally, is say not to offer answers, rationalizations, explanations. It's just a kind of in the category of horrific mystery that we're bearing witness to. And so the silence, like when I was referencing Rabbi R. Stone's silence, and our daily silence, our 10 minutes of silence, so the silence we just shared, is a practice, a practice of not knowing, of humility together, which is itself an action. It's not an absence of an action. I know in the the Holocaust Museum in DC has the phrase from Isaiah, Atem Edai, you are my witnesses, that it's about witnessing, bearing witness, which is what we do every day. Like you kind of reference, like, what do? We sit, we just witness what's happening within us and around us on a given day. This is really a day, of humble witnessing. So I want to really thank you for lifting that up for us.
Thank you.
How about this? How about if we, on that note, maybe we could just sit for one more minute together. And if you wouldn't mind bringing us out again with that nigun of Eli, Hannah Senish's poem. I don't know who wrote the music to it, probably not Hannah Senish, but evocative of her memory as well.
Absolutely.
Sit for one more minute together. Thank you so much, Susan. And thank you, Jet. And thanks each of you for being here today. We look forward to seeing you hopefully tomorrow. We'll be led tomorrow by Sarah Waxman about the well, who leads us on or near Rosh Chodesh, which the new month, which will begin this week, Thursday night and Friday, the month of Iyar. But Sarah will introduce us to the theme for the month of Iyar tomorrow. We hope you'll join us. If not, then sometime soon. Many blessings, everyone. Good to be with you.